Do open up your Bible, if you have it in front of you, at John chapter 1, or just listen in as we go. We're going to look at verses 1 to 9 of John chapter 1 this morning. It's a fantastic passage we're looking at, John chapter 1. As I said, we'll look at it over 2 weeks, John 1 verses 1 to 18. It's sometimes called the prologue of John's Gospel. That's just a posh word for an introduction, really, isn't it? It's the introduction to John's Gospel. And really it centres on, we're not going to come to this verse this week, but we will next week. It really centres on the start of verse 14. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We always remember the Christmas stories as told by Matthew and Luke at Christmas time. And we'll think about those as the month goes on, no doubt. But John's Christmas verse is John 1:14. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. But as I've said, this is an introduction, really, to John's Gospel. John chapter 1 and these opening verses. I just want to think a bit about introductions first of all. There aren't so many chat shows on the telly these days. There used to be a lot, didn't there? You'd have Wogan, and you'd have Parkinson, and you'd have all these kinds of people. I am just about old enough to remember them. But they would always introduce their guests. Tonight we're going to be joined by, and very often it wasn't their name that you got first. It was something like 3-time Golden Globe winner and leading actress, their name. Or perhaps you watch the football and there's a new pundit who's there to comment on the Champions League final, and they're introduced as 4-time Ballon d'Or winner and 2-time Champions League winner, top scorer in the Premiership for 3 seasons running, their name. The idea is this is someone qualified. This is someone worth listening to on their subject. On the news often you'll have experts introduced, won't you? And you'll be told a bit about them, not just their name, but who they are. Why you should listen to them. What are their qualifications? Well, that's basically what John is doing here in John and chapter 1. This is an introduction to the person that his gospel is going to be all about. So, who is he? And why should we be bothered? Why should we listen to what he says? It's quite an introduction. As I prayed, and I'm guilty of this, I prayed along the lines of sometimes we can become so familiar with certain parts of the Bible that we kind of glaze over as we read them. Has that ever happened to you in your quiet time? I confess it happens to me. I'll read through the verses I'm going to read that day, and I get to the end and think, I haven't really taken in a word of that. Or maybe it happens to you with a book you're reading. You get to the end of the page and you think, nope, I'm going to have to read that again. It can happen with the Bible too. It can happen with verses we're very familiar with. So we're going to try and just slow down a little bit this morning. Stop and think. And ask for God's help to do it. As we think about who the gospel is about. So, 4 things, or 5 really. 1, his name. John introduces him as the Word. And 4 things about him. The Word who was in the beginning. The Word who was God. The Word who created all things. And the Word who was light. So, first of all, just the first half of verse 1, well, the first third of verse 1, really. The Word who was in the beginning. So, we're going to go into a chat show. The host says, tonight, on our evening show, we're going to be joined by the Word. The Word was in the beginning. And you scratch your head. You scratch your head. It is always fascinating to hear about people, though, who were there
at the beginning of something that turns out to be huge. Perhaps a world-changing event or a world-changing movement. I've not been watching it, but apparently on the television at the moment, there's a documentary about the Beatles. I'm not even sure what channel it's on, but I've heard people talking about it. And there's footage of the Beatles as they wrote and sang their songs for the first time. Must be fascinating. One person had commented on hearing or seeing Paul McCartney sing Get Back to the rest of the Beatles for the first time. And, well, we listened to it and think, yeah, I've heard that many times. Saying, imagine being in the room to hear that for the very first time. No one had heard it. And there's Paul McCartney pulling it out of the ether, so to speak. Or a few years ago, I watched a film. I can't remember whether I would recommend it or not now, but I did watch it. It was called Social Network. Some of you may have seen it. It was about the beginnings of Facebook. Now, whether you're on Facebook or not, it's been world-changing. It certainly has. And the whole social media explosion has definitely changed the Western world in many ways. But fascinating to see how it began and what happened. But what is the beginning that John is talking about here? The beginning of everything. The beginning of the universe. At the beginning of the world. At the beginning of life. Just imagine somebody walks onto a chat show and they were there at the dawn of time itself. As I say, we're so familiar with in the beginning was the Word that it maybe stops staggering us and amazing us. But that is who John is introducing in his Gospel. Welcome to the stage, one who was there in the beginning of everything. Now, these opening 3 words of John's Gospel, they're very, very deliberate. He's chosen his words carefully. They're actually a precise echo of the opening 3 words of the Bible. When you turn back to the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, what are the first 3 words? In the beginning. John straight away is saying, I'm talking about a person who was there at the very start. The start of everything. How fascinating to meet that person. More than fascinating. Secondly, the Word who was God. So the second half of verse 1 and verse 2. So John writes, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The opening words of Genesis actually go like this. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. So who's the Word? Because John is talking about the Word here. He doesn't use the word God straight away. He uses the word the Word. Is he God or is he someone else? Well, at first we might think he's someone else from what John says. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was with God. Let's just dwell on that for a moment, because that in itself would be pretty impressive, wouldn't it? They were there right at the very beginning, and they were with God. So again, imagine somebody walking in here now. I introduce them to you. I'd like us to welcome this morning the Word. He was there in the beginning with God. Almost incomprehensible, isn't it? That somebody might actually walk into the room who was there at the dawn of time. What questions would you have? Just try and do, that thing where you start with a blank slate, blue sky thinking. Someone who was there with God at the beginning of time walks into the room. What do you want to know? What do you want the host to ask? I think you'd probably ask, you were with God? Tell me what he's like. Tell me what he's like. You would, wouldn't you? I would. What's he like? Has he changed over the millennia, countless millennia? Tell me, you were there in the beginning with God. Do you still talk often? Are you still in contact with him? Do you ever call? You'd want to know, wouldn't you? It's God, after all, he was there with in the beginning. I think I would want to know. As he looks down at the world, what does he think? What does he make of what's going on here? Do you think he's interested? Does he know about me? You might want to ask, did he really make everything? What do you think? You were there. Did he make everything? How did he do it? Then you might get into some of the more philosophical questions. Why did he do it? You were there. Why? Why make this world? Why make people like me and people like that? Why? I hope you get to the questions like, so what was the purpose in it all? What's life about? What's my life about? Is it just a case of one day I'm born, I grow up, I enjoy my childhood, or I don't? Then life gets hard as I reach an adult age and I realise the world's not easy. And then I die. Maybe I have some children along the way and they repeat the same. What's it about? Why? If someone was with God at the beginning, you'd have questions if they turned up, wouldn't you? Surely. But then, of course, John's introduction really does get staggering. He says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, there can be a lot of debate over that verse. As some of you know, the Jehovah's Witness ever knocks on the door, they'll tell you, it doesn't really mean that he was God. There should be a little in front of the God at the end of verse 1. He was a God. Well, none of us in this room, I think, are Greek scholars. So please take my word when I tell you that people who are say, no, there's not supposed to be an in front of the word God. Our Bible translations have got it right. The Word was with God and the Word was God. That's exactly what John intends to say. The Word was God. But this is the point at which, if our small human minds haven't been struggling already, this is the point where if you're really trying to engage with this, it begins to hurt a little bit as the cogs turn, doesn't it? Which one is it? He's with God or he is God? That's not a category we can really take in. The answer, of course, is that he is both. The Bible's answer always is, he is both. This is the Bible's teaching of the Trinity. A word that isn't found in the Bible, true, but a concept, a truth that is taught through the Bible all the way. There is one God in three persons. And all three persons are fully God. Now, it's tempting at this point to preach a sermon on the Trinity and leave us all with a headache at the end of it. There is a place, I'm not being facetious there, I'm not making light of the fact that we should think about the Trinity. We should. We need to think about it deeply, and the fact that it's true the Bible teaches it. I'm not going to go into all the various heresies about the Trinity now, though. I'm simply going to say that the Bible does teach from beginning to end, and there are books you can read and sermons you could listen to that go into it deeper. But the Bible teaches there is one God. He is in three persons. He always has been and he always will be. One God in three persons: Father, Son, and Spirit. The Word is one of those three persons. As John's Gospel goes on, it's clear that the one that the Word is the Son. We most commonly refer to him as the Son. He is one of those three. That's great news, isn't it? I'll tell you why it's great news. There's no chance of getting wrong answers to all those questions that you might have about God from someone who was with him in the beginning. Sometimes people do go on chat shows and they know someone more famous than themselves, and they're asked to, come on, tell us a few stories, spill the beans. Or they're asked, what is it like to be with this person? Sorry, my mind always goes to football illustrations. What's it like to train with Ronaldo? What's he like off the pitch? But it's second-hand information, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's just that person's views on what they're like. It's just their memory of what he's like, which might be faulty, it might not. It's their interpretation of why they may have done certain things. None of that with the Word, actually. Not only was he with God, he was and is God. I think this is vital for our evangelism, for example. If people have questions about God, where do you take them? Or who do you take them to? You take them to the Word, Jesus. That's the beginning point. Who is the one who reveals God to us? Who is there in the beginning with God and who is God? Who can answer all the questions about what God is like because he is God? Who can answer the questions about how did God make everything because he is God? Who can answer why did God make the world? Why did God make me? Because he is God. He did it. I often, with people when doing evangelism, people have lots of questions, don't they? Lots of questions about maybe evolution, about maybe suffering, about maybe the reliability of the Bible, all sorts of potential questions, and many, many others. One of the best evangelistic strategies is simply to say, well, first of all, why not go through John's Gospel with me, Mark's Gospel with me, any of the Gospels. Find out about Jesus first. Meet him first. And then see how you're feeling about all those other questions. Because Jesus is the one who answers them. He is the one who is God. He is the whole point of Christianity. We can get very bogged down in all the other things without ever getting to Jesus. And yet here is the one who was in the beginning, was with God, and was God. Go to Jesus. There's plenty of material in the Gospels that make it possible for you to introduce people to him. Let's go to him. Thirdly, he's the Word who created all things. Verses 2 and 3. So we'll read through from the beginning again. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were created through him. And apart from him, not one thing was created that has been created. Now we're talking about the one who made everything. So not only was he there, not only was he God, he was active as one of those three persons of the Trinity in creation itself. He designed it. That's important, isn't it? He designed it. A designer has something in mind before they build it, a purpose for it. They've thought it all through. It doesn't just happen by accident over time, with little bits added on here and there, an extension there, a Velux there, or I need to put in some more plumbing and electrics. No, he designed it all before he began, with a purpose. Having designed it, he then made it. We thought about that in the children's talk, didn't we? He made it, he spoke it. He spoke it into being. That's staggering. He spoke it into being. The book of Colossians, for example, teaches us that he's still active in sustaining it. This isn't a God who, like a watchmaker, makes a watch, winds it up and lets it go and just leaves it to tick and run. No, he's active in his creation, sustaining it, keeping it, upholding it. And it's one of the most staggering thoughts of Christmas. The baby lying in the manger looking up at the stars or the ceiling or whatever it is at the same time holding the stars in place in the firmament. Isn't that amazing? He made it, he designed it, he made it, he sustains it. Every last part of it. This is my attempt now just to cover the breadth and diversity of what he has made. And I'm not very good at this sort of thing, but I hope you get the idea. There are other people who are far more poetic than I am and can do this really well. But here we go. I studied geography. Tectonic plates. You know what tectonic plates are? Over the face of the earth are massive clumps of earth that move around and rub against each other. When they hit, they make mountains. When they separate, they create deep, deep ravines in the ocean. He made it. He thought of that. He spoke it. And it came into existence. Have you ever seen a camera try to capture a hummingbird in slow motion? It can't. The wings beat so fast you can't capture it in slow motion. Just a blur. And it stays perfectly still the whole time at a flower. He made it. He spoke it into being, and there it was. I learned at school about something called photosynthesis. What a genius could think of photosynthesis. The plants taking the carbon dioxide out of the air and producing oxygen for us to breathe. He thought that. He spoke it, and it was. Sunsets. I love a God who creates sunsets. Do we need sunsets? They're beautiful though, aren't they? I love sunsets. I love sunrises. I see more of those at the moment than I do sunsets. Beautiful. He's the one who designed them, spoke them into being. Music. Do you like singing? Maybe you prefer to hear it than hear yourself. I don't know. Do we need music? In one sense, I think we do. God thought of that. Jesus, the Word, thought of that and made it. Here's one I really don't understand. Relativity? Anyone? Not invented by Einstein. The Word spoke. and it came into being. And a smile on a child's face. Do you know that children, when they're born with this ability to recognise 2 dots and a line? I was told this by a professor from Bristol, not just me, he told a whole room full of people. He said that's why it's so important for a baby when they're born to see a human face, 2 dots and a line. Children who see that thrive, children who don't struggle. Who thought of that? He did. And he spoke it into existence. Language itself. Again, I was reading yesterday, on Facebook. There we are, Facebook again. But I follow a page that's all about language. And this person was trying to figure out where language came from, and they weren't very convincing. I said, well, it must just have developed over time. It must have, there's no other option. Yes, there is another option. The Word spoke. And there was a world full of words. As people spoke like him, made in his image. Whose idea was it? Who spoke it into being? He did. And we could go on, couldn't we? This is the one who enters the world stage at Christmas. He was in the beginning. He was with God and is God. He made everything that is. Without him, nothing was made that was made. This is who came into the world. That is staggering, no? That is staggering. Wouldn't you like to meet him? Lastly, the Word who was light. Verses 4 to 8. Let me just read them through again. In him the Word was life. And that life was the light of men. That light shines in the darkness, and yet the darkness did not overcome it. So there's the first thing. In the Word was life. How does John describe that life for us? It's as the light of men. He is light to people. Of course, the opposite of light is darkness. Now, we all know what it's like to be stumbling around in the dark, not knowing where we're going, not understanding what's happening, just being completely and utterly lost. That's what darkness does. Well, the Word was light. His life is light. Well, of course it is. If the world all seems darkness, well, go to the one who was there at the beginning, who made it, who designed it, who knows what it's for and why he made it, who is God. He's light. He is light. Now, verse 5 is fascinating. That light shines in the darkness, and yet the darkness did not overcome it. The world that the Word made was originally perfect, wasn't it? A world in which there was no metaphorical darkness. There was day and night, yes, but there was no spiritual darkness. But human beings who were made to know and love God, that's why the Word had made them, enjoy Him forever, they abandoned that and tried to be God themselves. They ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and darkness entered what the Word had made. But God did not abandon this world. The Word did not abandon it. He continued to shine in the darkness, and the darkness never completely expunged that light. God has always continued to speak into His world that has been plunged into darkness. When you get to the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament, Isaiah prophesies of a day when the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Who was Isaiah talking about? Because it is a who. The Word. And John picks up on that here. Here is the light. Later in John's Gospel, Jesus will say, I am the light of the world. When we got to the more philosophical questions that we might ask earlier, why is the world the way it is? What is my life for? Those are the ones we're stumbling around in the dark with, aren't we? And people out there are. Well, here's the light. He knows the answers to those questions. He can shed light on them. He can give life. Verses 6 to 7. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. That's John the Baptist. We're getting rooted into real world life events now. Not that the others weren't, but you know what I mean. The story of Christmas. The story of the Gospels. He came as a witness, this is John the Baptist, to testify about the light so that all might believe through him. John the Baptist was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. I've never really noticed verse 9 that much before. It sounds like a trailer to a film though, doesn't it? An epic one. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. And that's what Christmas then is about. We say this every year, but it bears repeating every year. At Christmas, we should enjoy our families. We should enjoy our gifts that we give to one another. We should enjoy all the different Christmas traditions and festivities. They're wonderful, enjoyable, great. We should remember those who don't get to enjoy them too, and for whom this time is very difficult. But let's not forget that what we're really remembering is the most staggering thing that has ever happened. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We have the most incredible message to share with people, don't we? The most incredible good news that the one who is the light of life, the creator of all things, God himself, has come. And for anyone who is lost in this world, lost in sin and in darkness, he is light and life. So let's make sure we tell people of him. I hope this morning has inspired us to do that. We can introduce people to the Word. Should we pray? Father God, we do thank you for the great plan of salvation. That even as you made this world through the Word, through your Son, and even as it turned its back on you, you did not abandon it. But you always intended to come into this world. The Word taking on flesh, the one who had designed and made and sustained this world, who is the only light there is in this world, has come into this world as a man. We thank you for that wonderful gospel truth. We thank you that he did that precisely that he might give himself for us. We thank you that the one who is light would one day be enveloped by darkness on the cross. But we thank you that that darkness did not overcome. That there was a dawn of resurrection. Sin, death and darkness defeated. Lord, what a wonderful gospel we have. Help us to believe it. Cause us to believe it. Help us to share it. And we ask it in your name. Amen.